The sky above Seoul wasn't just red. It was bleeding. A heavy, suffocating crimson smog choked the atmosphere, turning the midday sun into a bruised, dying star. This wasn't a weather phenomenon. This was a death sentence. The SSS-Rank gate, the crimson abyss, had fractured the dimensional barrier, hanging over the Han River like a gaping maw ready to swallow the civilization whole. Sirens wailed, a chaotic symphony of despair that drowned out the screams of millions. In the streets below, the social order had disintegrated. It didn't matter if you were a CEO of a conglomerate or a convenience store clerk. Beneath the weight of absolute annihilation, everyone was just meat. The monopressure radiating from the portal was heavy enough to crush lungs. Ordinary civilians collapsed where they stood, foaming at the mouth as their bodies rejected the foreign energy. This was the great filter. The moment humanity realized its place on the food chain. Not at the top. Not even close. Perched on the rooftops, the nation's absolute elite were paralyzed. These were the S-rank hunters, the celebrities, the gods walking among men who sported sponsorships on their diamond-encrusted armor. They were the ones who treated dungeon raids like fan meetings. But right now, their knees were shaking. The guild master of the White Tiger Guild, a man who could supposedly bench press a tank, was vomiting into his helmet. The sensory data coming from the gate wasn't just high. It was off the charts. It was a glitch in the system. "We can't go in there," the White Tiger whispered. His voice cracked. The arrogance that usually defined his jawline was gone, replaced by the sheer animalistic terror of prey sensing a predator. The mana density. It's acidic. It'll melt our skin before we even see the boss. "We have to retreat," the vice captain of the Phoenix Guild stammered, clutching her staff so hard her knuckles turned white. "The association has issued a level black evacuation. Seoul is lost. We need to fall back to the Busan perimeter." Seoul is lost. The sentence hung in the heavy air. The city was being written off as collateral damage. The system had failed. The hunters had failed. But amidst the weeping crowds and the fleeing heroes, one person was walking in the wrong direction. He didn't have shimmering plate armor. He didn't have a glowing magical staff or a cape that fluttered dramatically in the wind. He was wearing a stained gray hoodie, sweatpants that had seen better days, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. He looked like he had just rolled out of bed at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. This was Kang Jin-Ho, and he looked annoyed. Not scared. Annoyed. Jin-Ho pushed through the police barricade, ignoring the frantic shouts of the officers. In his right hand, he dragged something heavy. It scraped against the asphalt, carving a deep groove into the road. A massive, rusted iron cleaver. It looked less like a weapon and more like a slab of industrial scrap metal that had been sharpened by sheer hatred. In his left hand, he clutched a plastic bag from a convenience store. BNNB Jin-Ho didn't even look up. His stomach growled, a sound so loud it almost competed with the sirens. "I missed lunch," Jin-Ho thought, his internal voice dripping with irritation. "And the price of pork belly went up again. This economy is the real disaster. How is a man supposed to cultivate mass when inflation is hitting the butcher shop harder than a dungeon break?" He stopped at the edge of the evacuation zone. The S-rank hunters on the roof looked down, confusion breaking through their fear. Who was this nobody? A confused civilian? A D-rank porter trying to play hero for clout? "Kid, don't be a hero," the White Tiger Guild master shouted, his voice amplified by magic. "You'll die in seconds." Jin-Ho scratched his ear. "So noisy," he muttered. He looked up at the swirling vortex of the crimson abyss. Most people saw the end of the world. They saw demons and hellfire. Jin-Ho squinted. His eyes flashed with a dull, predatory gold light. He didn't see doom. He saw a menu. System analysis complete, his mind whispered. Target detected. High-grade protein, marbling index, SSS. Flavor profile, smoky, spicy, with a hint of sulfur. He licked his lips. Finally, some real food. Without a word to the stunned elites, Jin-Ho stepped into the light. The portal rippled, the world twisted. Inside the gate, gravity was a suggestion. The sky was a ceiling of jagged obsidian teeth. The ground was made of molten slag. The heat was instantaneous, a blast furnace that would vaporize a normal human instantly. But Jin-Ho didn't burn. The heat washed over him and simply vanished, absorbed by his skin like a sponge soaking up water. And there it stood, the Hellfire Behemoth. It was the size of a skyscraper, a mountainous golem of magma and hate, wreathed in black flames that burned hot enough to melt tungsten. It had 4 arms, each holding a weapon made of pure concentrated destruction. It roared, a sound wave that shattered the obsidian rocks for miles around. Warning. Boss monster detected. Entity. Hellfire Behemoth. Threat level. World Ender. The holographic text flooded Jin-Ho's vision. He swiped it away. Yeah. Skip the intro cinematic. I'm starving. Back in the command center, the guildmasters were watching the live feed from a high-durability drone that had followed Jin-Ho in. The room was dead silent. He's not wearing a mana shield, one analyst gasped, adjusting his glasses. He's taking the thermal radiation raw. That's impossible. His skin should be bubbling. Look at the behemoth. The white tiger master pointed at the screen. It's hesitating. The monster stared down at the tiny ant standing before it. It sensed something. The behemoth was an ancient creature, a destroyer of civilizations. It was used to fear. It fed on terror. But from this tiny human, it felt hunger. Not the hunger of a warrior seeking glory, but the primal, terrifying hunger of a predator looking at a snack. Jin-Ho tightened his grip on the rusted cleaver. The muscles in his forearm shifted, dense fibers coiling like steel cables. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't an awakened trying to save the city. He was a glutton who had awakened a class that the world deemed useless. The butcher. But they didn't know the passive skills. Passive skill activated. Tenderizer, Jin-Ho thought. Passive skill activated. Gourmet eye. Weak point identified. The neck. That's where the prime cut is. The behemoth swung. A fist of magma the size of a bus came crashing down. It was a strike meant to flatten armies. Jin-Ho didn't dodge. He didn't block. He stepped into the attack. Too slow, he deadpanned, and too raw. With a movement that blurred the frame rate of the drone camera, Jin-Ho swung the cleaver upward. There was no magic chant, no flashy aura, just pure, unadulterated kinetic force. Boom. The air pressure exploded. A vacuum wave sliced through the dimension, parting the sea of magma. The behemoth froze. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a thin red line appeared on its massive, molten neck. The mountain of fire tried to roar, but no sound came out. Slowly, impossibly, the colossal head began to slide. It crashed to the ground with the force of a meteor impact. The body crumbled into ash, defeated in a single, disrespectful stroke. In the command center, the guildmasters were on their feet. Their mouths hung open. The drone camera zoomed in on the fallen god. The threat was gone. The SSS-Rank calamity had been neutralized by a guy in sweatpants. He saved us, the analyst whispered, tears streaming down his face. He saved Seoul. Send in the recovery team, the white tiger master shouted, his ego recovering instantly. We need to recruit him. Offer him billions. Whatever he wants. But on the screen, Jin-Ho wasn't celebrating. He wasn't posing for the camera. He was rummaging through his plastic bag. He pulled out a portable camping grill, a cheap one, the kind you buy for $20 at a discount store. He set it up right on top of the behemoth's still glowing carcass, using the monster's residual body heat as a stove. Then came the salt. He opened the bag of sea salt, the expensive kind, the flakes that cost more than his entire outfit. With the precision of a Michelin star chef, he began to sprinkle the salt over a massive chunk of meat he had carved from the behemoth's neck. Finally, Jin-Ho sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. Do you know how hard it is to get a reservation at a place like this? He slapped the meat onto the grill. Sizzle. The sound echoed in the silent boss room. The drone hovered closer, confused. The entire world watched in stunned silence as the savior of humanity flipped his steak, checked the sear, and pulled a pair of chopsticks from his back pocket. Medium rare, he muttered to himself, ignoring the dimensional instability around him. Perfect. He wasn't saving the world. He was just having a barbecue. And honestly, the terrifying reality wasn't that he could kill a god. The terrifying reality was that to him, gods were just livestock waiting to be seasoned. Bro really looked at the apocalypse and said, "Looks tasty." The handcuffs were heavy, not because they were made of star-forged mana-suppressing alloy designed to restrain S-rank criminals. No, they were heavy because they made it really hard to eat a sandwich. Kang Jin-Ho sat in the back of the armored transport vehicle. He looked bored. Across from him sat two agents from the Hunter Association's Special Crimes Division. They were sweating. They were armed with high-caliber Magitech rifles capable of blowing a hole through a tank. And they were terrified of the guy in the gray sweatpants who was currently trying to dislodge a piece of spinach from his teeth with his tongue. Technically, Jin-Ho was under arrest. The charge? Illegal dungeon poaching. Apparently, killing a catastrophic boss monster without a license and turning it into a barbecue party was a violation of international law. Who knew? The government had two choices: execute him and risk him getting annoyed enough to fight back, or throw him into the system. They chose the system. The vehicle screeched to a halt. The doors hissed open. Welcome to Valhalla Hunter Academy. This wasn't just a school, it was a fortress. A sprawling city-state built on a floating island above the Pacific Ocean, protected by 3 layers of translucent mana barriers. This was where the monsters of the future were made. The sons and daughters of chaebols. The prodigies who awakened S-rank talents at age 10. The genetically modified super soldiers sponsored by multinational corporations. It was the peak of human potential. The air smelled like ozone and unearned superiority. Jin-Ho stepped out. The cuffs clicked off. Listen here, maggot, the escort officer spat, trying to regain some dignity. You might be strong, but in here you're nothing. This is where the elite are forged. Don't think your backyard grilling skills will save you. Jin-Ho didn't hear him. He was looking at the statues lining the entrance. Giant marble depictions of legendary hunters. Too lean, Jin-Ho thought. No body fat. The meat would be tough, stringy. 2 out of 10. He walked into the great hall for the entrance ceremony. It was a cathedral of glass and gold. Thousands of students stood in formation. Their armor cost more than the GDP of a small country. Their weapons glowed with enchantments. They radiated an aura of intense focus and ambition. And then there was Jin-Ho, wearing his I Love BBQ t-shirt, standing in the back. Yawning. The headmaster took the podium. He was a legendary figure, the sword saint of the East, a man whose mere presence made the air vibrate. Welcome, the sword saint bellowed, his voice amplified by magic. You are the shield of humanity. You are the blade that cuts the darkness. In this academy, strength is absolute. Hierarchy is law. The students cheered, fists pumped in the air. The passion was as palpable. Jin-Ho's stomach growled. It sounded like a subway train derailing. He ignored the speech. His eyes drifted to the side of the stage. The beast taming department was showing off their familiars. It was a display of power. A massive silver-maned lion stood proud, its fur rippling with electrical energy. A twin-headed viper coiled around a pillar dripping acid, and center stage a majestic creature, the celestial elk, a rare spirit beast. Its antlers were made of pure crystal. Its eyes held the wisdom of the forest. It was a symbol of purity and grace. The beast taming instructor was beaming with pride, petting the creature's nose. Jin-Ho's eyes narrowed. Passive skill, gourmet eye. Activated. The world shifted. The golden hall faded. The students disappeared. All Jin-Ho saw was a thermal map of muscle density and fat distribution. Shoulder loin, Jin-Ho analyzed internally. Excellent marbling. The magical energy in the antlers suggests the bone marrow would be rich, savory. Maybe a slow roast? No, a tartare. The meat is too pure to cook. He started drooling, visibly. The celestial elk froze. Animals have a sixth sense. They know when a predator is near. But this wasn't just a predator. This was an apex consumer. The elk let out a terrified bleat. Its legs gave way. It collapsed on the stage, shivering uncontrollably. The beast-taming instructor panicked. What's wrong? Is it a curse attack? Secure the perimeter. The lion whimpered and hid behind the instructor. The viper tried to tie itself into a knot to disappear. Jin-Ho wiped his mouth. Damn. This school has a great pantry. The sorting ceremony was brutal. A mana crystal measured potential. Colors flashed. Gold, blue, purple. The crowd gasped as the scions of famous clans hit high scores. Lee Min-soo, Class A. Park Ji-won, Class S. Then came Jin-Ho. He placed his hand on the crystal. Nothing happened. The crystal didn't glow. It didn't react. It just sat there looking like a confused paperweight. The system couldn't read him. His power wasn't mana. It was hunger. Pure, conceptual hunger. The proctor sneered. Mana capacity. 0. How did you even get in here? Must be a diversity hire or a bribe. The verdict was swift. Kang Jin-Ho, Class F. Laughter rippled through the hall. Mockery. Disdain. Class F was the fodder class. The porters. The meat shields. The ones expected to drop out or die in the first semester. Jin-Ho walked to the designated Class F area. His new teammates were waiting. They looked pathetic. There was Han-soo, a skinny boy with glasses who was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He held a rusty dagger like it was a poisonous snake. Then there was Mina, a girl clutching a healing staff who looked like she was about to cry. We're doomed, Han-soo whispered. Class F. We'll get the worst rations, the worst dorms. We're just cannon fodder. Jin-Ho looked at them. Then he looked at the map of the academy grounds on the wall. He pointed to a red zone on the outskirts of the island. What's that? Jin-Ho asked. That? Mina sniffled. That's the Forbidden Forest. It's a high-level dungeon zone. Even seniors don't go there without a raid party. It's filled with venomous monsters. Why? Venomous, Jin-Ho repeated. Spicy. He grabbed Han-soo by the collar. He grabbed Mina by her backpack. Let's go, Jin-Ho said, dragging them toward the exit. Whoa, where? Han-soo shrieked. Orientation isn't over. Orientation is boring, Jin-Ho said, pushing open the heavy oak doors. And the cafeteria food smells like processed garbage. We're going grocery shopping. The Forbidden Forest was a nightmare. The trees were twisted black claws that blocked out the sun. The fog was thick and smelled of sulfur. Every shadow hid something with too many teeth. Han-soo was sobbing. Ah, please, let's go back. I'll do your laundry. I'll pay you. My dad owns a dealership." "Quiet," Jin-Ho said. He was walking confidently through the underbrush, snapping branches, making as much noise as possible. "Why are you making noise?" Mina hissed, her face pale. "You'll attract them." "That's the point," Jin-Ho replied. He stopped in a clearing. "We need bait." "Bait?" Hansu asked. "What bait?" Jin-Ho pointed at Hansu, then at Mina. "You guys." "What?" Before they could protest, the ground rumbled, the trees shook, a screech tore through the air. It sounded like a rooster that had inhaled helium and then grown to the size of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. From the fog they emerged, basilisk chickens. They were horrific, 10 feet tall, feathers like steel plates, beaks that dripped with neurotoxic slime. Their eyes glowed a petrifying yellow. In the monster encyclopedia, these were rank B predators. A pack of them could wipe out a seasoned military squad. There were 3 of them. Hansu screamed. It was a high-pitched sound that birds would find offensive. He fell backward, scrambling in the mud. Mina raised her staff, but her hands were shaking too much to cast a shield. The alpha chicken lowered its head. It hissed. The feathers on its neck flared up. It prepared to strike, to tear these intruders apart. This was death. This was the reality of the hunter world. But Jin-Ho wasn't looking at the claws. He wasn't looking at the poison. He was looking at the thighs. "Look at that muscle development." His internal monologue ran wild. "Free range, high activity levels. That meat is going to be gamey but tender if handled right. The poison sac in the throat adds a natural peppercorn flavor if you neutralize the toxins with heat." "Stay back!" Hansu shrieked, throwing a rock. It bounced harmlessly off the chicken's armored leg. The alpha chicken lunged, beak open, ready to decapitate the crying boy. "Rule number 1 of the kitchen," a voice said, calm and cold. Jin-Ho stepped in between. He didn't have a weapon. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, rusted paring knife. The kind you use to peel apples. Preparation is key. The alpha chicken didn't care. It snapped its jaws shut. Snap. But there was no blood, no scream. Jin-Ho had caught the beak. With one hand, he held the massive dinosaur chicken's jaw open. His grip was iron. The monster thrashed, flapping its wings, creating gusts of wind that knocked trees over. Jin-Ho didn't budge. He looked bored. "You've been eating too many venomous bugs," Jin-Ho criticized, looking down the monster's throat. "It ruins the flavor profile." Then the air shifted. A dark golden aura exploded around Jin-Ho. It wasn't mana. It was something older, something more primal. It was the manifestation of the food chain itself. Skill unlocked, gourmet dismantling, SSS-Rank. Description: the ability to separate flesh from bone, toxin from meat, and life from death with absolute efficiency. Against ingredients, critical hit chance is 100%. "Let's see," Jin-Ho muttered. Wing joint, thigh connection. Breastplate. He moved. It wasn't a fight. It was surgery. Jin-Ho spun. The paring knife flashed. It was a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to track. He danced around the alpha chicken. 1 cut, 2 cuts, 50 cuts. He didn't hack, but he didn't slash. He disassembled. The alpha chicken looked confused. It took a step forward. Then it fell apart. Literally. Neatly stacked piles of meat landed on the forest floor. The feathers were stripped and piled to the left. The bones were cleaned and stacked to the right. The poison sacs were carefully removed and placed in a Ziploc bag Jin-Ho had produced from nowhere. The chicken didn't even know it was dead until it was already ingredients. The other 2 basilisk chickens froze. They looked at their leader, or rather the pile of fillas that used to be their leader. Their reptilian brains short-circuited. Bro just turned their boss into a bucket of KFC in 3 seconds. They turned to run. "Where do you think you're going?" Jin-Ho asked, his eyes glowing that terrifying gold. I'm making a family bucket, he lunged. 5 minutes later, the clearing was silent. Hansu and Mina were huddled together. They were alive, unharmed, but they were traumatized. They had expected a battle for survival. They had expected a heroic last stand. Instead, they watched a cooking show. Jin-Ho had built a fire, a large one. He had skewered the massive basilisk thighs on sharpened branches. The smell of roasting meat wafted through the terrifying forest, overpowering the sulfur. It smelled incredible. Hey, Jin-Ho called out. He was sprinkling something from a small pouch. Do you guys prefer spicy or mild? I brought my own spice blend. The cafeteria here doesn't use enough cumin. Hansu blinked. We're alive? Obviously, Jin-Ho scoffed, flipping a skewer. The fat dripped into the fire, hissing. You can't eat if you're dead. Come here. The dark meat is best when it's hot. Mina stood up slowly. Her legs were wobbly. She looked at the S-Rank threat that had been turned into lunch. She looked at the F-class failure who was currently humming a pop song while basting a monster with its own fat. Who? Mina whispered. What are you? Jin-Ho took a bite. He chewed. He closed his eyes, savoring the texture. Me? Jin-Ho swallowed. I'm just a guy who hates frozen food. He looked at the leaderboard on his smartwatch. The academy system had detected the kills. Ranking update. Class F, Kang Jin-Ho. Points gained, 50,000. Current rank, 1. The entire school was about to lose its mind. The instructors were probably scrambling the jets. The elites were probably vomiting in fear. Jin-Ho tossed a skewer to Hansu. The boy caught it by reflex. Eat up, Jin-Ho said, grinning. We need to bulk up. I saw a hydra in the lake on the way here. I'm thinking calamari for dinner. Hansu looked at the skewer. He looked at Jin-Ho. He took a bite. Tears streamed down his face. It was the best damn chicken he had ever tasted. And just like that, the hierarchy of Valhalla Academy was broken. Not by a sword, not by magic, but by a guy with a paring knife and an endless appetite. The bottom of the food chain had just decided to eat the top. The western wastelands were a graveyard of ambition, a desolate expanse of cracked earth and howling winds where the mana density was so erratic it could turn a man's blood into steam. But today, the wastelands weren't just dangerous. They were ground zero for the apocalypse. The tectonic plates groaned, the earth split open like a rotten fruit. From the fissure rose a creature that hadn't seen the sun in 5,000 years. The ancient earth dragon. Designation, Terra-Rex. It was a mountain given life. Its scales were the color of dried blood and harder than diamond. Modern magic bounced off its hide like rain on a windshield. A tactical nuke wouldn't even scratch the itch on its back. The S-Rank hunters on the scene were ants trying to fight a volcano. In the command center of the Hero Association, the atmosphere was a thick sludge of panic. Monitors flashed red. Casualty reports scrolled by faster than the eye could read. Magic resistance is at 100%, a technician screamed, his voice cracking. Physical immunity is near absolute. The Iron Blood Guild has been wiped out. We need backup. The association chairman slammed his fist on the table. The coffee mug rattled. Get me Kang Jin-Ho now. Sir, we tried, the aide stammered. He hung up. He what? He said he was busy marinating chicken wings and that saving the world doesn't pay for premium soy sauce. The chairman rubbed his temples. The veins in his forehead were throbbing. The fate of the Western Hemisphere rested on a guy whose priority list put lunch above human survival. Send the envoy, the chairman growled. Take the ancient text. The one from the dungeon of the Glutton King. It's our only card. Jin-Ho was lying on his couch. The air conditioner was humming. A K-drama was playing on the TV. He looked peaceful, the picture of a man unbothered by the impending doom of civilization. The door burst open. 3 suits from the association rushed in, breathless and sweating. "Mr. Kang, please," the lead agent begged, dropping to his knees. "The Earth Dragon is advancing on the settlement. Tens of thousands will die." Jin-Ho didn't look away from the TV. "Sounds like a skill issue. Send the S-ranks. I'm on my break." "The S-ranks are dying." "Then send the SS-ranks. Look, I'm not a charity. Do you know how much inflation has hit the price of garlic? I can't afford to work for exposure." The agent trembled. He reached into his briefcase, or his hands shook as he pulled out a crumbling parchment. It smelled of old dust and forgotten spices. We found this," the agent whispered. A translated entry from the imperial chef of the Lost Age. Jin-Ho paused. His ear twitched. "It describes the Earth Dragon," the agent continued, reading the highlighted text, specifically the tail meat. It says, "The flesh is marbled with manna veins that carry the richness of the earth itself. When seared, the fat renders into an oil that tastes of aged black truffles and A5 Wagyu beef. The texture is that of butter that has dreamed of becoming a steak." Silence filled the room. The K-drama continued to play, but Jin-Ho wasn't watching anymore. He sat up. The air pressure in the room dropped. "Black truffles?" Jin-Ho asked. His voice was low. "Dangerous." Yes," the agent squeaked. And Wagyu?" The text says, "Wagyu that makes the gods weep." Jin-Ho stood up. The floorboards cracked under the sudden shift in his center of gravity. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a lazy college student. They were the eyes of a starving wolf looking at a sheep. "Why didn't you lead with that?" Jin-Ho snapped, grabbing his jacket. "You people have no sense of urgency. That meat is aging by the second. If it gets overcooked by a stray fireball, I will sue the Association for Culinary Negligence." "Wait, Mr. Kang, the transport helicopter is 5 minutes out." "Helicopter?" Jin-Ho scoffed, walking to the balcony. "Too slow. By the time that flying tin can get there, the juices will settle unevenly." He climbed onto the railing. He looked toward the west. "I'll run." The sky over the wastelands was a war zone. 2 F-22 Raptors screamed through the clouds, afterburners lighting up the smog. They were engaging the Dragon from a distance, firing mana-tipped missiles that cost $2 million a pop. "Target impact confirmed," Pilot 1 radioed. "No effect. I repeat, no effect. It's like shooting a mountain with a spitball." "Pull back," Command ordered. "The Dragon is charging a breath attack." The Earth Dragon opened its maw. A ball of concentrated gravity began to form, sucking in the light around it. It was going to erase the horizon. Suddenly, a sonic boom shattered the windows of the cockpit. "What the hell was that?" Pilot 2 yelled, swerving his jet. "Radar didn't pick up anything. Was that a missile?" Pilot 1 looked down. His eyes widened behind his visor. "No," he whispered. "That's a person." Below them, a blur of gray was tearing across the desert floor. A shock wave trailed behind him, kicking up a sandstorm that rivaled the Dragon's size. Jin-Ho wasn't running. He was propelled by the pure, unadulterated desire for lunch. He was moving faster than the speed of sound. His sneakers were disintegrating. Distance: 5 kilometers. Jin-Ho calculated, his internal clock ticking. Heart rate: 120. Stomach status: empty. Patience: 0. The Dragon sensed him. It turned its massive head. The gravity ball fired. A beam of pure destruction tore through the desert, turning sand into glass. It was a straight line of death aimed right at the running ant. Jin-Ho didn't slow down. He didn't dodge. "Get out of the way," he roared. "You're burning the crust." He jumped. He didn't use a skill. He just kicked the air so hard it solidified. He launched himself directly into the beam. The energy washed over him, stripping away his jacket, revealing the t-shirt underneath. But it didn't stop him. He punched the beam. Physically. The energy scattered, shattering into harmless sparks of light. The laws of physics filed a formal complaint and were ignored. Jin-Ho crashed into the dragon's snout with the force of a meteor impact. Boom! The shockwave flattened the surrounding dunes. The dragon's head snapped back. A creature that weighed 50,000 tons was lifted off its feet. The raid team on the ground stared. Their mouths hung open. They were the Steel Legion, a guild of high-level tankers. They had been fighting for 3 hours just to survive. Did he just uppercut a kaiju? The guildmaster whispered, lowering his shield. Jin-Ho landed on the dragon's nose. He looked tiny, insignificant. But the aura radiating off him was heavier than the monster itself. He took a deep breath, sniffing. Earthy, Jin-Ho critiqued. Notes of sulfur. Good. The truffle scent is there. But the scales... He tapped the dragon's snout with his knuckle. Clang. It sounded like hitting a bank vault. Too much packaging. The dragon roared. It was humiliated. It shook its head, trying to throw off the parasite. It summoned spikes of earth from its skin, trying to skewer the human. Jin-Ho dodged. He weaved through the spikes like water. He wasn't fighting a monster. He was prepping ingredients. Hold still, Jin-Ho scolded, grabbing a spine the size of a telephone pole. I need to check the texture. He pulled. There was a sound like tearing metal, a shriek that defied nature. Jin-Ho ripped the spine out, root and all. Blood sprayed, but it wasn't red. It was a glowing golden ichor. Gold blood, Jin-Ho noted, tossing the massive spine aside like a toothpick. High mana concentration. That means the meat will be self-cooking if I apply the right pressure. The dragon panicked. For 5,000 years it had been the apex predator. It ate kingdoms. It slept on piles of gold. It had never known fear. But now it looked into the eyes of the tiny man standing on its face, and it saw something worse than death. It saw a customer review. The world was watching. The raid was being live-streamed to billions. Viewers in Tokyo, New York, and London were glued to their screens. Chat rooms were frozen. Our user_hero. Fan 69. Is he tenderizing it? User_gluttony king. Bro is peeling the dragon like a banana. User_gov_. Official. Someone check his license. Does he have a permit for dismantling historical landmarks? Jin-Ho jumped to the dragon's back. The scales here were thickest. The absolute defense. Let's see if the rumors are true, Jin-Ho muttered. He raised his fist. No magic circles. No glowing swords. Just a fist that had opened too many stubborn pickle jars. Passive skill. Gourmet dismantling. Technique. The oyster shucker. He punched. He didn't punch the scale. He punched the gap between the scales. Crack. The force injected air under the armor plate. The pressure built up instantly. Pop. A scale the size of a dinner table flew off, spinning into the air. Then another. Then another. Our Jin-Ho was running down the dragon's spine, stripping it naked with his bare hands. He was a whirlwind of culinary violence. Too tough, he yelled, throwing a scale at a hovering drone camera. This section is brisket. It needs to be slow-cooked for 12 hours. Where is the tail? The dragon thrashed, screaming. It tried to roll over. It tried to fly. But Jin-Ho stomped on its neck, pinning it to the ground. I said, hold still, Jin-Ho shouted, slapping the dragon. You're ruining the marbling. Stress makes the meat sour. He reached the tail. This was it. The prize. The black truffle Wagyu. The tail was massive, thick with muscle and covered in spikes. Jin-Ho looked at it with the tenderness of a mother looking at her newborn. Beautiful, he whispered. He placed his hand on the thickest part of the tail. Gourmet dismantling. Fillet cut. His hand blurred. He chopped. It was a karate chop, a simple, blunt strike, but it carried the conceptual weight of a butcher's cleaver. The tail severed, cleanly, instantly. The dragon let out one final confused gurgle and passed out from the sheer shock of being disassembled alive. Silence fell over the wastelands. The dust settled. The S-Rank hunters slowly approached, their weapons lowered. They looked at the unconscious dragon. It was missing half its scales and its tail. It looked like a plucked chicken that had gone through a blender. And there sat Jin-Ho. He had built a fire in the middle of the battlefield, using the dragon's own scales as a heat shield. He held a chunk of the tail meat. It sizzled on a flat rock. The smell hit the hunters. It was intoxicating. A rich, earthy aroma that made their knees weak. It smelled like luxury. It smelled like victory. The guildmaster of the Steel Legion swallowed hard. He stepped forward. "Mr. Kang," he said, his voice trembling. You saved us. You neutralized the calamity." Jin-Ho flipped the steak. "Don't talk to me. I'm focusing." "But sir, the world is watching. You're a hero. You defeated the Earth Dragon." Jin-Ho took a bite. He chewed slowly. The world held its breath. He frowned. "A bit chewy," Jin-Ho muttered loud enough for the drone microphones to pick up. The ancient text lied. This isn't A5. It's barely A4, and the truffle note is more like store-bought truffle oil. He sighed, looking disappointed. 6 out of 10. Need salt. The livestream comments exploded. The Hero Association chairman fainted. The dragon, having regained consciousness for a split second, heard the review and fainted again out of shame. Jin-Ho packed up the rest of the meat into his dimensional storage bag. He stood up, dusting off his sweatpants. "All right," he said, addressing the stunned hunters. "I'm taking the rest to go. You guys can clean up the rest. Oh, and tell the association to send my payment in sea salt. The pink kind." He walked away into the sunset, leaving behind a traumatized dragon and a confused world. He wasn't the hero they wanted, but he was the only one hungry enough to get the job done. And the scary part? He was still looking at the dragon's liver, wondering if it would make good pate. The cafeteria of Valhalla Hunter Academy was usually a war zone, not the kind involving monsters and magic, but the mundane, desperate war of hungry teenagers fighting for the last pork cutlet. The air typically smelled of overcooked cabbage and teenage angst. But today, the cafeteria smelled like heaven. It was a scent that bypassed the olfactory nerves and went straight to the soul. It was rich, earthy, and dripping with a savory heaviness that made mouths water instantly. It was the smell of the Earth Dragon tail, the A4 grade absurdity that Kang Jin-Ho had wrestled from the western wastelands just days ago. Jin-Ho was not in the kitchen. He was in the center of the outdoor courtyard, sitting cross-legged on a bench he had dragged out into the sunlight. On a small, portable butane stove sat a cast-iron skillet, and in that skillet sat the steak. It was 2 inches thick. The marbling was a map of culinary perfection. The fat rendered slowly, hissing a seductive song that silenced the entire quad. Jin-Ho checked his watch. 2 minutes on the first side, he thought, his internal voice trembling with anticipation. 1 minute, 45 seconds on the flip. Rest for 5 minutes. The texture will be like butter made of dreams. He was focused. He was in the zone. This wasn't just lunch. This was a ceremony. Around him, students watched from a distance. The F-class freak had become a campus cryptid. You didn't approach him when he was cooking. Last time a senior tried to steal a sausage, they woke up 3 hours later tied to a flagpole with no memory of the event. "He's doing it again," a student whispered, recording on his phone. Is that the dragon meat?" "Shh," another hissed. "Don't disturb the seer." The academy was peaceful. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. It was the perfect moment. which meant, according to the laws of dramatic irony, it was time for everything to go wrong. The sky shattered. It didn't crack. It broke. The protective mana barrier that dome-shielded the academy, a masterpiece of magical engineering designed to withstand tactical nukes, dissolved like sugar in hot tea. A siren wailed. It was the code-red alarm. The "we are all going to die" alarm. From the fractured sky, black smoke poured down. It wasn't just smoke. It was necrotic mana. It rotted the leaves off the trees before it even touched the ground. Figures descended from the darkness, draped in tattered robes that reeked of the grave. They were the Rotting Hand, a terrorist organization classified as a global threat. They didn't want money. They didn't want political power. They wanted to corrupt dungeon cores, turning safe zones into monster spawners to accelerate the apocalypse. They were edgelords with a budget. "Rejoice, children of the false light," the voice boomed across the campus, amplified by dark magic. It came from a man floating in the center of the formation. Malos the Decaye. He wore a mask made of human bone and held a staff pulsating with a sick green light. "Your sanctuary ends today," Malos shouted, extending his arms. "We shall plant the seed of rot in your core, and this academy will become a tomb," students screamed. Panic erupted. The cafeteria doors burst open as hundreds of trainees stampeded, trampling over each other to get to the bunkers. Instructors were shouting orders, summoning weapons, trying to form a defensive line. Explosions rocked the courtyard. Green fireballs rained down, melting the stone and turning the manicured lawns into sludge. It was chaos. It was war. It was a tragedy. But Malos had made a miscalculation. A tactical error so severe it would likely be studied in history books under the chapter Darwin Awards. He aimed a suppression blast at the center of the courtyard to clear the area. The blast of necrotic wind slammed into the ground. It flipped benches. It shattered windows. And it knocked over a small, portable butane stove. Time slowed down. Jin-Ho watched. His eyes were wide. He reached out, his hand grasping at the air. No. The cast iron skillet tipped. "Don't you dare." Gravity, that heartless mistress, took hold. The dragon-tail steak, seared to a perfect golden brown crust, the inside undoubtedly a warm, pulsing pink, slid from the pan. It didn't land on a plate. It didn't land on a napkin. It landed in the dirt. Splat. The sound was quiet, almost inaudible amidst the screams and explosions, but to Jin-Ho it was louder than a nuclear detonation. He watched the steak roll. It picked up dust. It picked up grit. A piece of dry leaf stuck to the rendering fat. The juices, those precious flavor-packed juices, leached into the dry soil of the academy grounds. Ruined. 5,000 years of aging. A supersonic sprint across a desert. A physical brawl with a kaiju. All for this moment. And now it was covered in dirt. Malos the Decayer landed in the courtyard, surrounded by his elite guards. He laughed, a raspy, villainous sound. "Behold, the despair of the elite, cowardice, fear. Where are your heroes now?" The students were running. The instructors were pinned down. But one person wasn't moving. Jin-Ho stood up. He kept his head down. His gray sweatpants were stained with soot. His "I love BBQ" t-shirt was rippling in the wind caused by the villain's mana pressure. "Hey," Jin-Ho said. His voice was soft. It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper that somehow cut through the explosions. Malos turned, his bone mask grinning. "Oh? A brave student? Or simply a fool who wishes to die first?" Jin-Ho slowly raised his head. The students who were hiding behind the rubble froze. They knew that look. They had seen it in the cafeteria line when the nuggets ran out. But this was different. There was no light in Jin-Ho's eyes. The golden predatory glow was gone, replaced by a void. a black, bottomless abyss of pure, unadulterated hatred. The air in the courtyard changed. The temperature didn't drop. It vanished. The pressure became heavy, sticky, like walking through drying concrete. "Do you know," Jin-Ho asked, his voice devoid of any human inflection, "what the internal temperature of that steak was?" Malos blinked. He was confused. He was expecting a speech about justice, or friendship, or protecting the weak. "What nonsense are you spewing, worm?" Malos raised his staff. "I am the herald of the rot. I bring death." "It was 128 degrees Fahrenheit, Jin-Ho continued, taking a step forward. "Medium rare. The proteins had just begun to relax. The fat was translucent." He took another step. The ground beneath his foot cracked. Not from force, but from the sheer weight of his presence. "I marinated it for 48 hours, Jin-Ho said. "Soy sauce, mirin, a hint of garlic, and a spice blend that cost me a week's tuition." Malos felt a chill run down his spine. It was an instinct he hadn't felt in decades, the instinct of a prey animal realizing it had walked into a trap. "Kill him," Malos ordered, pointing his staff. "Burn him to ash." 3 of the elite guards lunged. They were B-rank villains, veterans of a dozen slaughters. One swung a poisoned dagger, one cast a paralysis hex, one swung a massive warhammer. Jin-Ho didn't even look at them. Skill, kitchen awareness, auto-activate. Target 1, filth. Target 2, contaminant. Target 3, trash. The dagger came first. Jin-Ho caught the wrist. He didn't block it. He caught it. With a flick of his wrist that looked effortless, he snapped the assassin's arm at the elbow. Crack. The sound was wet and sickening. The assassin screamed, but the scream was cut short as Jin-Ho spun him around, using the villain's body as a shield to block the paralysis hex. Then came the hammer. Jin-Ho released the assassin and stepped into the hammer's arc. He placed his hand on the weapon's shaft. "You have terrible form," Jin-Ho critiqued coldly. "You're overcompensating for a lack of core strength." He punched. It wasn't a martial arts strike. It was a piston, a short, compact jab to the solar plexus. Boom! The shockwave blew the armor off the villain's back. The man folded like a cheap lawn chair, his eyes rolling back into his head as he vomited blood. "Get him off my patio," Jin-Ho muttered. He kicked the unconscious body. The villain literally flew, across the courtyard and embedded himself into a concrete pillar 50 feet away. Silence. Absolute silence. Malos stared. The students stared. The surviving assassins stared. "What? What are you?" the assassin stammered, backing away. "You're not a student. That wasn't manna." Jin-Ho looked at the dirtied steak on the ground. He looked at the assassin. "You ruined the Maillard reaction," Jin-Ho whispered. The aura around him exploded. It wasn't golden anymore. It was red. Deep, blood-curdling crimson. It formed a silhouette behind him, a maw. A giant spectral mouth filled with rows of jagged teeth. Warning, entity status shift. Current state, hangry to bloodlust. Passive skill, apex predator activated. Apex predator. All lower life forms within the radius suffer the status effect, primal fear. Eyeing stats of prey are reduced by 50%. User's hostility is converted into physical force. The students felt it instantly. Their knees gave out. It wasn't magic suppression. It was biology. Their bodies were telling them to play dead. Malos, an A-rank villain who had slaughtered entire villages, felt his bladder release. He was trembling. His staff rattled in his hands. "You," Malos gasped. "You are a monster." "A monster?" Jin-Ho tilted his head. A vein popped in his forehead. "No. A monster is something that eats people. I don't eat people. You taste like cheap cigarettes and failure. You're not food." He cracked his knuckles. "You're waste." Jin-Ho vanished. He didn't teleport. He just moved faster than the villains could process visual information. He appeared in front of the remaining guards. It wasn't a fight. It was a disposal service. Jin-Ho grabbed two villains by their heads. He slammed them together. The sound was like two watermelons colliding. He didn't stop. He moved through their ranks like a blender through fruit. This is for the marinade. Punch. A villain flew into the fountain. This is for the resting time. Kick. A villain was launched into the second-story window of the library. And this is for the truffle oil. He grabbed a caster who was trying to summon a skeleton. Jin-Ho didn't punch him. He simply slapped him. The slap echoed like a gunshot. The caster spun in the air, did a 720-degree rotation, and face-planted into the dirt. Malos was alone. His army was gone. His elite guard was scattered like bowling pins. The rotting hand, the terror of the underworld, had been dismantled in under 30 seconds by a college student who was angry about his lunch. Malos scrambled back. He tripped over his own robes. "Stay back. I am a vessel of the dark god. If you strike me, the curse will—" Jin-Ho stepped on Malos's chest. The villain wheezed. The weight was unbearable. It felt like a mountain was pressing down on his ribs. Jin-Ho leaned down. His face was inches from the bone mask. His eyes were burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "I don't care about your god," Jin-Ho said. "Does your god have a recipe for salvaging a dirt-covered steak?" "Well, what?" "Does he?" Jin-Ho roared. "No, please," Malos shrieked, tears streaming down his face behind the mask. "I'm sorry. I'll pay for it. I have gold, mana crystals." "Money can't buy time," Jin-Ho said, his voice dropping to a mournful whisper. You can't undrop a steak. It's gone. The moment is gone." He reached down and ripped the bone mask off Malos's face. The villain looked pathetic, just a scared, middle-aged man with bad skin. Jin-Ho looked at him with pure disgust. Skill. Butcher's appraisal. Meat quality. F rank. Rotten. Toxic. Zero nutritional value. Useless, Jin-Ho spat. "You're not even worth cooking." He raised his fist. The air distorted around it. "Get out of my kitchen." Boom. The impact shook the entire floating island. A crater formed in the center of the courtyard. Malos was buried 10 feet deep into the earth, unconscious, defeated, and possibly reevaluating every life choice that led him to this moment. The dust settled. The siren had stopped. The smoke was clearing. Jin-Ho stood in the center of the crater. He was breathing hard. Not from exertion, but from the sheer emotional damage of losing his lunch. He walked over to the fallen steak. It lay there, tragic and alone in the dust. He stared at it. The students, who had begun to peek out from their hiding spots, watched in terrified silence. Was he going to kill them too? Was he going to destroy the school? Jin-Ho sighed. A long, heavy sigh that carried the weight of the world. "What a waste," he whispered. He bent down, picked up the steak, and tossed it into a nearby trash can. "Hansu!" Jin-Ho barked, not looking back. The skinny boy from Class F popped up from behind a bush, adjusting his glasses. Yes, Hyung." "Pack the stove," Jin-Ho ordered, wiping the soot off his face. "We're going to the cafeteria." The cafeteria?" Hansu stammered, looking at the unconscious bodies of the most dangerous terrorists in the country. "But the attack—" "The attack is over," Jin-Ho said, walking away. "But lunch hour isn't. If we hurry, we might get the last of the spicy pork. And if anyone cuts in line—" He glanced back. His eyes flashed gold for a split second. "I'll treat them like the side dish." The students parted like the Red Sea. No one spoke. No one breathed. They just watched as the F-class legend walked toward the cafeteria, stepping over the body of a dark wizard as if he were merely a discarded napkin. In the distance, the headmaster watched from his office tower, lowering his binoculars. He took a sip of tea. His hand was shaking slightly. "Note to self," the headmaster muttered to his secretary. "Upgrade the cafeteria budget. Give him whatever he wants. Wagyu, caviar, phoenix eggs. Just keep him fed." "Is he a hero, sir?" the secretary asked, pale-faced. "No," the headmaster replied, watching Jin-Ho enter the building. "He's a natural disaster with an appetite, and God help us if he ever decides to go on a diet." The rotting hand had come to spread decay. Instead, they found out that in the food chain of Valhalla Academy, they weren't the hunters. They weren't even the prey. They were just the flies buzzing around a lion's dinner, and the lion was hangry. The crater where Malos had been buried was smoking. The dust had settled. The students of Valhalla Academy were beginning to stand up, their legs shaking, believing the nightmare was over. They were wrong. Malos was defeated. But his final act, a curse etched into the very mana ley lines of the island, had completed its circuit. The sky didn't just turn dark this time. It turned wrong. The clouds curdled like spoiled milk. A hole tore open in the fabric of reality directly above the academy. It wasn't a gate. It was a wound in the universe. From the void, a pressure descended that made the gravity of a black hole feel like a gentle breeze. System alert. Global catastrophe detected. Entity: Asmodeus, the Lord of Gluttony. Rank: impossible. A hand the size of a city block gripped the edges of the dimensional tear. It was red, scaled, eyes and dripping with a black sludge that hissed as it touched the atmosphere. Then came the horns, curved obsidian spires that scraped the stratosphere. Finally, the face. 3 eyes burning with the light of dying stars, and a mouth filled with rows of teeth that could grind mountains into dust. Asmodeus had arrived. The demon lord didn't scream. He didn't roar. He simply inhaled. The air rushed into his maw. Mana was stripped from the environment. The protective barriers of the academy shattered instantly. Students fell to their knees, clutching their chests as their own life force was tugged toward the sky. Hunger. The voice wasn't a sound. It was a psychic shockwave. It vibrated in the marrow of every living thing within 1,000 miles. The sword saint, the headmaster of Valhalla, dropped his blade. His hands were trembling uncontrollably. This was the end. The history books had warned of this. The entity that had consumed the lost civilization. A being that existed solely to turn planets into calories. "It's over," the vice headmaster whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We can't fight that. It's a god." Despair. Absolute, crushing despair. The S-rank hunters, the hope of humanity, looked like frightened children. They were ants staring up at a boot, but amidst the weeping and the praying, one person was standing upright. Kang Jin-Ho. He wasn't looking at the ground. He was looking up, and he wasn't trembling. He was squinting. Passive skill. Gourmet eye. Overclocked. Information flooded Jin-Ho's brain. The sheer density of the mana, the texture of the skin, the spiritual weight of the soul. To anyone else, Asmodeus was a manifestation of evil. To Jin-Ho, he was a buffet. That aura, Jin-Ho analyzed, his internal monologue racing. It's not just corruption, it's fermentation. Thousands of years of aging in the void. A flavor profile that transcends the physical realm. It's cosmic umami. He licked his lips. His stomach roared louder than the dimensional tear. "Finally," Jin-Ho whispered. "The main course." Asmodeus began to descend. His shadow covered the entire island. He raised a finger, charging a sphere of annihilation energy meant to wipe Valhalla off the map as an appetizer. "Be consumed," the demon lord intoned. "Hey, big guy!" The shout cut through the psychic pressure. Asmodeus paused. The massive eye shifted down, focusing on the microscopic speck standing on a pile of rubble. Jin-Ho had tied a napkin around his neck. He was holding his rusted cleaver in one hand and his paring knife in the other. "You're interrupting my lunch," Jin-Ho yelled, pointing the knife at the god. "And since you ruined my steak, you're the replacement." The demon lord blinked. The concept was foreign to him. He was the eater. He was not the eaten. Insolence. Asmodeus flicked his finger. The sphere of annihilation dropped. It was a ball of pure void, a miniature black hole. It fell toward Jin-Ho, erasing the air as it moved. The students screamed. This was it. The idiot F-class had provoked the apocalypse. Jin-Ho took a deep breath. He centered his gravity. He didn't run. He didn't dodge. He tapped into a reserve of power that had been dormant since his awakening, under the power of a chef who has just realized he has 5 minutes to prep a banquet for 1,000 people. Domain expansion. The words were soft, but they echoed across the world. The chef's domain. Michelin star purgatory. The world snapped. The color drained from the sky. The chaotic battlefield of the academy vanished. In its place, reality reconfigured. The ground became a pristine, white marble surface, a cutting board the size of a continent. The burning clouds transformed into the stainless steel ceiling of an industrial kitchen. The sun was replaced by heat lamps. And Asmodeus? The skyscraper-sized demon lord was no longer floating in the sky. He was lying on the cutting board. "What is this?" Asmodeus roared, trying to move, but he couldn't. Spectral chains made of golden manna bound his limbs, but they weren't chains. They were butcher's twine. Jin-Ho stood before him, but he wasn't tiny anymore. In this domain, Jin-Ho was the giant. A spectral avatar of the chef loomed over the demon lord, wearing a pristine white chef's coat and a toque hat that scraped the heavens. "Welcome to the back of the house," Jin-Ho's voice boomed from everywhere at once. "Hygiene check failed. You're filthy." The sphere of annihilation that Asmodeus had fired, it was currently floating in a giant spectral sink, being scrubbed by a sponge the size of a mountain. "You call this an attack?" Jin-Ho scoffed, shrinking back to human size but moving with the speed of light across the marble surface. "This is just bad presentation." Asmodeus panicked. For the first time in eons, the Lord of Gluttony felt fear. He summoned legions of shadow demons from his flesh. "Kill him! I consume him!" Thousands of demons swarmed Jin-Ho. They were S-rank threats individually. Together, they were a plague. Jin-Ho didn't flinch. He spun his cleaver. "Garnish," he muttered. "Slice." It was a single movement, a horizontal slash that defied physics. The air split. The thousands of shadow demons didn't die. They were Julianed. Perfectly even strips of shadow fell to the ground, dissolving into a fine black powder. "Pepper," Jin-Ho noted. "Good. Needs more heat." He looked at Asmodeus. The demon lord tried to stand, breaking the twine. He summoned a sword of hellfire, swinging it down to split the domain in half. Jin-Ho jumped. He landed on the flat of the hellfire blade. He ran up the sword, the heat washing over him uselessly. "Such. Your internal temperature is uneven," Jin-Ho criticized, sprinting toward the demon lord's chest. You're burning on the outside but frozen on the inside. Amateur mistake." He reached the chest, the heart of the demon lord, the core of his power. Asmodeus swatted at him. "Get off me, insect!" Jin-Ho dodged the hand. He grabbed a fold of the demon lord's skin. Skill. Gourmet dismantling. Ultimate art. The 5-course flay. Jin-Ho moved. He became a blur of golden light. He was everywhere at once. Cut 1. Descaling. The impenetrable obsidian armor of the demon lord shattered, peeling away in neat uniform sheets. Cut 2. Deveining. The corruption, the toxic sludge that made Asmodeus deadly was surgically extracted. Rivers of black poison were siphoned away into spectral waste bins. Cut 3. Tenderizing. Jin-Ho's fists rained down. 1,000 punches in a second. Shock waves rippled through the demon lord's massive body, breaking down the tough connective tissue without damaging the meat. Asmodeus screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of indignity. He was being prepped. He was being turned into ingredients. "I am eternal. I am the end," Asmodeus howled. "You are dinner," Jin-Ho shouted back, appearing right in front of the massive central eye. Cut 4. The sear. Jin-Ho clapped his hands. The heat lamps in the sky intensified. The mana friction ignited the air. A golden fire engulfed the demon lord. It wasn't a destructive fire. It was a cooking fire. It smelled of roasting spices, of caramelizing sugars, of stardust and victory. Asmodeus looked down at his own body. He was glowing. He was turning a beautiful golden brown. "Why do I smell delicious?" Asmodeus whispered, confused by his own aroma. "Because you have potential," Jin-Ho said, hovering in the air with his cleaver raised high. "You just needed the right chef." Cut 5. The plating. Jin-Ho swung. The domain flashed white. There was no sound of impact, just the soft, satisfying thud of a knife hitting a cutting board. The illusion shattered. The white kitchen vanished. The academy returned. The sky cleared. The sun shone down, bright and innocent. Asmodeus was gone. The skyscraper-sized monster had vanished. In the center of the crater, where the monster had stood, was a pile of meat. It was immense. Stacks of perfect steaks, roasts and ribs, piled as high as the dormitory buildings. They were steaming. They were cooked to perfection. The smell wafted over the island, healing the mental trauma of everyone who inhaled it. Silence. The sword seant lowered his weapon. The students peeked out from the bunkers. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Jin-Ho's voice broke it. "Does anyone have A1 sauce?" Actually, never mind. That would be an insult to the meat. 2 hours later, the apocalypse had been canceled. The global news networks were running loop footage of a giant spectral chef hat, but no one could explain what had happened. In the middle of the ruined courtyard, a massive bonfire was crackling. The S-rank hunters, the elite of the elite, were sitting on logs. They were covered in bandages. They looked shell-shocked, but they were eating. The sword saint held a skewer of demon lord kebab. He took a bite. His eyes widened. He dropped the skewer. He started crying. "My old injury," he sobbed, clutching his shoulder. "The curse I got in the abyss. It's gone. The flavor. It tastes like my mother's cooking. It tastes like forgiveness." The vice headmaster was eating a rib. She was glowing. Literally glowing. Her mana capacity had just doubled in 3 bites. "This is impossible," she mumbled, juice dripping down her chin. "This is elixirs. We are eating biological artifacts." The students were feasting. The fear was gone, replaced by a food coma of epic proportions. The rotting hand cultists who had survived the initial blast were currently tied up in the corner, begging for a scrap, defeated not by magic, but by the smell of barbecue. And there was Jin-Ho. He was sitting on the head of the statue of the founder, looking down at the feast. He held the heart cut, the prime piece of the demon lord. He took a bite. He chewed. He frowned. Heat control was off. He grumbled to himself. Han Su, who was currently eating a steak the size of his torso, looked up. "Hyung, are you crazy? This is the best thing I've ever eaten. It tastes like stars." "It's slightly overcooked," Jin-Ho insisted, poking the meat. The entry burn from the atmosphere toughened the outer layer by 0.5%, and the corruption removal left a slightly bitter aftertaste. "Like burnt garlic," he sighed, disappointed. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Next time, I need to summon him in a vacuum to control the temperature better. The S-Rank stared at him. The man who had just soloed a planetary threat, turned a god into groceries, and saved the human race was complaining about the texture. The Sword Saint wiped his tears and looked at the head of the Hunter Association. "Give him the license," the Saint said. "Which one?" "All of them. And a budget. I give him the national treasury if he asks for it. Just keep him happy." Jin-Ho took another bite, looking at the sunset. The world was safe, but more importantly, he was full. For now. I wonder what a kraken tastes like, he thought, his eyes drifting toward the ocean. I bet it goes great with lemon. The world had a new hero, but he wasn't a savior. He was just a gourmand with a very, very sharp knife. And the menu was just getting started.